Welcome to an Extra Shot audio blog presented by the Exchange Coffee Podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson. Our topic is the history of instant coffee, and a link to the written version of the blog can be found in the episode description. Instant coffee, a brief history. When Robert Falcon Scott set out for the Arctic in 1901, he carried a version of instant coffee, a powdery extract that had to be stored in an airtight container to keep it from forming one giant coffee clot if exposed to moisture. The powder would then clump up anyway when added to hot water. The heat required during manufacturing to evaporate brewed coffee into a powder also evaporated almost all flavor. Despite the issuance of several patents in subsequent years, instant coffee didn't approach market viability until World War I, by which time manufacturers had learned to evaporate a thick coffee liqueur into a powder to maintain at least a little coffee flavor. During the war, the entire production of soluble coffee from instant coffee pioneer G. Washington Coffee Company went to the American troops. Most soldiers despised the taste and yet praised the practical value of a hot, caffeinated cup of George in the trenches. After the war, use among American consumers remained limited. Serving instant coffee to guests in the 1920s would be like serving freeze-dried backpacking food to your guests today. Manufacturing innovations by Nestle and others improved the taste of instant coffee over the years, but it wasn't until the 1950s and the era of space-age convenience that consumption began to grow significantly in the U.S. In 1953, 10% of all cups of coffee in the U.S. were instant. By 1970, that number had grown to 26%, and correspondingly, 28% of Americans were drinking instant coffee daily by 1977. Instant coffee would cling to a daily consumption share of 1 in 4 American adults into the early 1980s. It's not a coincidence that this growth in consumption of instant coffee closely paralleled a decrease in overall coffee consumption. In 1962, Americans were drinking 3.12 cups of coffee per day per capita. By 1988, that had been cut almost in half to 1.67 cups a day. Instant coffee didn't cause the decrease. It was a symptom of an overall decrease in coffee quality. As daily consumption of instant coffee hit its peak of 28% of adults, daily consumption of regular coffee bottomed out in the neighborhood of 38% of adults, where it would remain until the late 1980s. By the early 1970s, the quality of regular coffee was so poor that instant coffee, with its new freeze-dried production process, could compete on taste. In the absence of quality, convenience became the determinant of consumer choice. It certainly wasn't price, as instant coffee sells for a premium at retail, one of the great coffee industry ironies, especially in that era. Most coffee-producing countries didn't allow extremely low-quality coffee to be exported, but these types of regulations did not apply to coffee that had undergone a manufacturing process and turned into soluble coffee. The result was that some of the world's lowest-quality coffee, and thus cheapest, became some of the most expensive and profitable per cup on the grocery store shelf. Consumption of instant coffee began its nosedive in 1983 when it dropped to 22% and then never looked back. By 1993, daily consumption of instant coffee was at 12%, and in 1999 fell below 10%. Daily consumption of instant coffee bottomed out at 6% in 2004, then bounced back to 6 to 9% until the pandemic, when it hit 11% in the summer of 2021. As of January 2022, daily consumption of instant coffee was at 9% of U.S. adults. In the same way that an increase in consumption of instant coffee coincided with a decrease in the quality and consumption of coffee overall, the subsequent decrease in consumption of instant coffee coincides with the emergence of the specialty coffee industry. One could find some correlation between stabilization and even a slight rise in instant coffee consumption and Starbucks introducing instant coffee to their product mix in 2009. The company said it had been developing an instant coffee for 20 years. Daily consumption of instant coffee had been nearly cut in half over those 20 years, which could have been interpreted either as an opportunity lost or gained. Howard Schultz told the Wall Street Journal that he had been secretly serving the instant coffee to guests in his home, and no one had detected a difference. Claims about taste aside, it seems clear that Starbucks helped launch a new generation of instant coffee at a time when even a modest but noticeable improvement in taste over the instant coffees of the day resulted in a successful revenue-driving product launch. At the time, coffeehouse customers were revealing a surprisingly balanced decision-making process when surveyed. In August 2007, when Mintel International Group asked self-identified coffeehouse customers what they like about their favorite coffeehouse, 62% said reasonable prices, 62% said serves me quickly, 61% said consistently high quality, and 61% said conveniently located close to where I live. In the 2000s, fast food operators and convenience stores, in unison to agree that seemed almost conspiratorial, had come to understand that they needed only increase the quality and cost of their coffee incrementally to capture a larger share of the quality-conscious coffee consumer and the prized middle ground where dual consumers of both specialty and traditional coffee live. At the same time, the quality-driven coffee retail sector could do little to compete on the field of convenience. To their credit, Starbucks saw this trend and responded with drive-through stores, which, at least back in those days, averaged 30% higher revenue annually than a store without a drive-through. The specialty coffee industry was created in opposition to poor quality coffee that was prevalent in 1982, when instant was still 24% of daily consumption and the niche was simply us versus them. Today, coffee quality exists on a continuum, with bad coffee on one end and exceptionally high-quality coffee on the other, and miles of coffee that is good enough in the middle. Given the innovations in instant coffee processing and the increased availability of private label manufacturing, better than expected instant coffee has become a reasonable place to play for specialty coffee roasters. You've been listening to an Extra Shot audio blog presented by the Exchange Coffee Podcast, written and read by Mike Ferguson. Our theme music for this episode is Instant by Netson, used under Creative Commons. Check out more details on that in the episode description. And never ever forget you can contact us using electronic mail, on a computer, or personal digital assistant at coffeetheexchange@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.